Hey everyone, welcome back. We just had a fat update drop last night, the Prime Resurgence. If you haven't heard, every single Prime in the game is getting unvaulted sequentially as part of the new unvaulting system. You can redeem Prime sets and parts with Aya, which will soon drop from Void missions starting on November 16th. Regal Aya can be used to buy sets instantly, as well as the Prime Vault cosmetics tied to the frame. For full info, check the thread on the forums, which you can get a hot link to in the description as well as the pinned comment. Alongside this mainline was another update, the release of 4 new augments. 2 were for Zaku, which I intend to look at later, 1 for Lavos, and 1 featured today, Champion's Blessing for Trinity. This is a very interesting augment that isn't completely game-changing, but gives Trinity some raw firepower to round out her kit. It's kinda similar to Teeming Violence in the sense that you need to cast ability and has conditionals that grant weapon crit chance, or also similar to some other frame passives, such as Ureli giving pistols crit chance when moving and Zephyr to all weapons when in the air. But Champion's Blessing gives more than all of those, except Teeming Violence. Yet Teeming Violence needs 292 strength to match Champion's Blessing, which is uncommon. Teeming also only applies to primary weapons, whereas Champion's gives us options to play with both primaries and secondaries. Uniquely, Champion's Blessing also continues to stack on existing casts so long as you don't let it expire, meaning you can build to the 350% crit chance cap over multiple casts by refreshing its duration. The only issue with Champion's Blessing? It scales off percentage health healed, and it's very easy to heal up in Warframe already by the time you reach more niche late game builds like this. It scales off allies as well, but realistically in the shield gate meta you're unlikely to get much HP heals off on them, assuming they even stay within the affinity radius. Pets are another option, but very unreliable and can also just straight up die. You can't heal them when they're down. Champion's Blessing also does not scale with strength, meaning the percentage of HP bars you heal is identical to the buff. 1% HP healed is a 1% crit chance buff. Just to be clear, this is mod crit chance, so it scales off the weapon base. You're going to have to heal 3.5 health bars worth of HP to max the mod effect, but building some strength is still important because the amount of health restored by Bless is affected by strength. This makes the augment kind of awkward to build around. Basically, you're just building a normal Bless setup with a few tweaks. Duration would be pretty important because if you let the buff expire, well, now you have to restart your hard-earned crit chance buff from 0. This is where a nice little trick comes in. We're going to look at 2 different Trinity setups today. The first one is going to feature our beloved multi-shot bow Cernos Prime. A few of you actually asked me to look at this bow after the Daiku video the other day, and I was prepared to drop a video for that yesterday, but then the mainline came and fixed a long-standing bug that gave the Cernos Prime a 2x damage buff on the vertical spread mode. There goes my script and I had to redo everything, but conveniently can actually squeeze that setup into this video for Trinity today. Basically, the premise is you can use her with nearly any weapon. These are just interesting setups I want to feature today. Keep that in mind. So let's take a quick look at Cernos Prime. 35% crit chance. Perfect for critical delay because it pushes it above 100% crit. But actually, we aren't using that today. The weapon has a 30% status, which is quite fair because we shoot 3 arrows at once. That's right, Cernos Prime has innate 3 multi-shot. Another unique thing is that minus accuracy basically makes the bow switch modes. Vertical mode becomes a perfect horizontal spread, and horizontal mode turns into a perfect vertical spread. This would make vertical mode insane for crown killing, as every arrow in the shot becomes part of a headshot fan. You can see why the removal of the 2x damage multiplier bug on the vertical mode was a big change on the weapon. Let's grab that build. This is a pure electric Cernos Prime today with some slash thrown in. Now let's look at this quickly. The weapon is 90% impact. It still isn't worth building internal bleeding on this weapon. The status chance isn't high enough, and even if you want pure IPS, the only time internal bleeding procs more on Cernos Prime than Hunter Munitions is if you run a hammer shot instead of Vital Sense on a pure IPS setup, but now you're losing critical damage, and the odds are 34% slash versus 30. Just don't do it. Like I said earlier, minus accuracy makes the bow reverse firing mode, so we're going to be running split flights on the vertical mode. This makes us shoot horizontal head level with 15 arrows. Because we're only shooting head level, building electric and electric dots can headshot, we're slotting galvanized scope instead of critical delay. Now we're talking fat crits. The mod gives 320% crit chance at max stacks alongside Champion's Blessing for another 350%. This results in a true crit chance of 269.5%, and Avenger will push this above 300 for pure reds on a Cernos. Cernos is one of the lowest crit chance for crit focused bows, but this lets us make the most out of the innate multi-shot. And for once, this isn't a meme red crit setup. This is actually optimal. Prime Shred so we can punch through crowds on the grouping setup and proc as much electric as possible. Bane's to double dip to electric procs, the standard 2 electric mods, and crit chance. Exilus can be whatever, I took Vigilante Supplies. Deadhead because we're literally only hitting and chaining heads with electric. Also the free headshot multiplier. That multiplier also double dips on electric procs if they headshot, kind of like a budget Amalgam Daiku target acquired, and I'm sure you know how strong that showcase was. Basically Daiku would still hit harder. That's it. Let's look at the first Trinity setup. Surprise, another combat discipline build, but this is expected because this is one of the ways to drain your HP to field Champion's Blessing since we're damaging ourselves. I've also slotted Arcane Avenger as well to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, as that will push our Cernos above 300% crit. Energized because the build only has 45% efficiency, and duration is so high that Energy Vampire can't sustain you. I'm using a max combat discipline build to speed up how fast we cut our HP down. I'm actually comboing this with a Bleeding Dragon Key. Imagine the day you don't use Decay Dragon Key to cut shields and choose to cut health instead. That's because Bless is a free max health anyways, so shield max is irrelevant, but a 75% health penalty means it only takes 8 enemy kills to bottom out your HP. Casting Bless when that happens will scale 99% into the Champion's Blessing buff. Knocking down your HP 4 times will be enough to camp out the buff, and this shouldn't be hard with just 75 max HP. You might be wondering this puts you at risk of dying to Toxin procs, but let's be real. On Steel Path, even if you have 300 HP, instead touching a Toxin Cloud or getting hit with Nox will instantly kill you regardless. We can also slot Quick Thinking because Combat Discipline can actually kill you if HP is too low. Quick Thinking makes it so it burns energy instead if you are at 2 HP, and that's also why we equipped Prime to Flow. Bless also reduces the amount of damage you take from Combat Discipline, so you only take 3 damage per kill if it is active, and 1 energy per kill if you have 2 HP. This is why Bleeding Key is so important to drop your max HP to just 75. Because the build is so insanely energy intensive, we have opted for both Arcane Energize, which can give us 175 energy back, as well as Equilibrium, which we're pairing with a Synthset Panzer that lets us gain tons of health orbs from pet assists via Viral Quill spreading, and then Equilibrium will turn that into even more energy. We want a ton of duration since we're managing Bless, which we cannot let the crit chance buff fall, as well as potentially Link, which is only here to give us an 8 Prime Sure-Footed to save a Mon slot. At 227 duration with Prime Continuity and partial rank narrow-minded, this makes Link and Champion's Bless last 27 seconds. The damage reduction from Bless only lasts 23 seconds, so if that falls, you definitely know you need to cast Bless again before the crit chance buff expires. Treat it as a sort of leeway safety warning. I found 27 seconds total duration was enough that I was still able to remember to cast my 3 and 4. We need some strength to make sure to restore all our health for the Augment to scale, so I've slotted Blind Rage. We don't cap the damage reduction from Bless, but that's irrelevant because we're playing a shield gate meta. We want as much range as we can reasonably fit, so I've slotted Overextended and Cunning Drift. This is to fuel and snare and gives it a 16 meter radius. It is a bit on the smaller side, but it still works. Bullet jumping to cast in middle of crowds works best. Energy Vampire is useless on this build as it takes 2 pulses to refund the cost of the cast itself, and it takes 5 seconds per pulse. I have a Vast Lock purely to armor strip the Acolyte. This is the build I'll be using. Nothing special except attack speed and shattering impacts. Xeneric to help energy economy with energizing dash, as it is still taxing, and the Panzer I talked about earlier with the Synthset bonus for infinite health orbs. I actually took off Martyr because it heals you when you're on low HP. This makes it impossible to cast Bless for Champion's Bless effect. I also reduced Fetch to rank 0 for an 8.5 meter radius instead of 13.5, as it can be very difficult to lower your HP to heal with such a large grab radius. Let's throw in some showcase with the Corrupted Heavy Gunners. Ensnare is the key to the setup, just like the Daiku one. Yes, the Daiku is still better, especially since they removed the 2 times damage on the vertical shot of Cernos Prime yesterday, but Cernos can still work. It is a little bit more difficult to get your stacks up, but once you do, it kills nearly as well as the Daiku. You can try building for gas if you want, but it's extremely hard to reliably kill enemies at the start before you get stacks, as the weapon does lower damage, has less status chance, and doesn't have access to target acquired like Daiku does for the double dip headshot multipliers, and resorts to Deadhead instead. The gap between Amalgam target acquired and Deadhead is even larger than the Prime Banes versus normal Banes, and magnified for double dipping headshot dots. It also has much worse slash odds compared to Daiku's force impact procs on every shot, but it can still work as you can see. Honestly, what you see here is similar to how Cernos was performing yesterday without the Champion's Bless Augment when it still had the 2 times damage multiplier in the vertical mode. On the bright side, all you see are red crits, so that's a prettier one than Daiku, am I right? Oh, this setup also works on the Bramma. It reaches 202.5% crit chance with absolutely no crit chance mods on the build and only using a max bonus Champion's Blessing with Arcane Avenger. Basically only oranges. And if you slot Critical Delay or Galvanized Scope, check out my Bramma video if you want to learn how to use Galvanized Scope on Bramma, you will see mostly or entirely reds as well. And the Chakkhurr? 270% crit chance without any crit chance mods on the weapon. This lets you drop the crit chance mod for Vile Acceleration. Galvanized Aptitude doesn't work on the AoE, so I'd recommend sticking with Amalgam Serration for base scaling and sprint speed. Otherwise, Hammer Shot also works since it will buff your status from 59.4 to 81% for even higher chance of proccing Viral for the internal bleeding slash. Chakkhurr has force impact on both the main shot and the AoE, so that's 2 chances for slash and also 2 chances for viral. Let's take a look at the other Trinity setup. There are 2 key differences on this build. We now have a rank 0 combat discipline instead of rank 5 because we aren't sourcing Champion's Blessing from our aura anymore. It is only being used to proc Arcane Avenger. The other change is we've dropped Quick Thinking for a Vigorous Swap because we're no longer at risk of killing ourselves with our aura. This build does involve a fair amount of weapon swapping, so the holster speed is appreciated as well as the base damage. We also don't need a Bleeding Dragon key equipped anymore since we're actually going to buff ourselves using percent HP damage instead of flat HP damage. Besides that, everything else is the same. Enough strength to get full heals and 69% damage reduction. Nice. Equilibrium for the fat energy economy from your Panzer since that viral quill synergy again, Prime Flow for the fat energy bar to accompany Equilibrium and Arcane Energize, and a ton of duration so that Champion's Blessing and Link feel better to use. Link is once again your main source of Prime Sure-Footed, so don't forget to use that. And Snare is our main source of CC and grouping for DPS. This is Hema. These are all the mods you need. Also make sure your pet has both synth mods on them. If you shoot this a bunch of times and holster by meleeing for the holster reload, it will drain an insane amount of HP. It isn't linear HP drain scaling, so you do want to drain most of the mag as it will take out a lot more HP than earlier on. About 2/3 of the magazine should be enough to bottom out your HP to 2. It's also percent HP base drain, so your HP max is irrelevant. That's why we're not using a Bleeding Dragon key. Now you can cast Bless. Voila, a 90% Champion's Bless. Now shoot the gun again and repeat the process until you hit 350%. I wouldn't say this is necessarily as practical, and this is the kind of strat I would only really suggest if you want to play survival or endurance, as it takes a lot longer and is less convenient to set up than combat discipline if you're just hopping into a hunt drop mission like capture or mobile defense or those other non-endurance runs. Basically takes a lot of energy to set up at the start and some time, but it is worth it for a guaranteed reliable max buff quickly without needing enemies. Now our actual DPS today, I've chosen the Catabolyst. It is a very unique weapon. First, we're going to use the basic beam build. It is extremely strong because it has innate corrosive. So we can build viral on it with 60/60 to multiply the corrosive damage like this. The beam now has 129% status chance. You'll shred enemies apart with this build. Galvanized Shot for even more status, and because with just 2 status effects, it still gives us 240% base damage, which is more than Hornet Strike. Being a beam weapon means the headshot kills are extremely easy since we're going on raw damage, so we're equipping Galvanized Crosshairs for 320% extra crit chance and Primary Deadhead for a longer buff duration per stack. It also gives us that extra 30% headshot multiplier. Remember, we also have Arcane Avenger on the setup. Galvanized Crosshairs fully stacked with Champion's Blessing, and Arcane Avenger pushes this beam to 129.7% crit chance for a fair amount of oranges, and it only had base 11% crit chance at the start. Prime Bane because nothing else to really slot, or Anemic Agility is an option though. And Seeker for the much needed punch through any single target weapon would need to kill crowds with ease. How this one works? Bring a random melee. You shoot the Hema like I said and melee to holster, until you get the buffs up on Champion's Blessing to max for 350%. Then you just use the Catabolyst like a normal weapon. Just make sure to bless from now and then again before the crit buff expires. The Catabolyst does not auto reload on empty. You have to manually reload by pressing R, which will throw the magazine to do AoE damage. That actually leads into our next build, so let's take a look at that. So about that grenade throw on the reload, there are 2 versions, one when the magazine is fully empty and one when there's still ammo remaining. The partial reload throw sucks, so we're gonna ignore that. The empty magazine reload on the other hand has insane multipliers. 2,000 base damage in fact. Basically halfway through the reload animation you will throw the magazine. How to use this properly? You will throw it and swing your melee immediately afterwards. This will cancel the reload and leave you with an empty magazine, but you still would have thrown the grenade. DE tried to prevent us from doing this though. If you throw from 0 magazine again a second time, it will use the partial reload throw instead, which is much weaker and can't crit properly. To get around this is why we bring a pet with synth mods for the holster reload. If the magazine has non-zero ammo and you bottom it out again, then the throw will be using the super strong empty reload stats instead. So long as your holster reload gives you back at least 1 ammo, we can spam the nuke throw as much as we want. The empty throw also has a 7 meter AoE radius instead of 5 meters, but it isn't affected by prime fulmination. This is where Ensnare comes in handy again, as you don't need a massive radius for that. So let's take a look at a build for this. This is a very interesting and unique weapon build. First, multi-shot does not affect the throw, which is why we skip it. Second, this thing hits so hard we have spare slots. I've chosen to use the spare slot on anemic agility, which lets us bottom out the magazine faster again if we do accidentally fully reload. Third, the throw is treated as the last bullet, so synth charge works on it and will magnify the damage by a multiplicative 3 times bonus. This also further improves the holster reload set bonus, meaning you barely have to wait to regenerate that 1 ammo between throws when you swing your melee. The AoE explodes only on contact, so I'm using conventional crit chance mods Creeping Bullseye. Fire rate is irrelevant, so I want to get as much crit chance as I can get instead of using Prime Pistol Gambit. Crit damage is obvious. Primed Expels because our scaling damage will actually come from dots. So for our elements today, I've selected both gas and electric. We have the slots for it, so why not? Gas because the AoE dots will persist even after the enemies die, meaning we won't lose all our damage as the crowd is killed off and stragglers remain. Electric, on the other hand, instantly loses the AoE dot from the enemy when they die, but we are also taking electric because electric scales off of elementals, whereas gas doesn't. Therefore, our big damage will come from electric chaining at the start, and gas will be there to finish any stragglers off. Energizing shot on the X-List because you'll be chucking grenades a lot. The Trinity setup, as you saw, is energy intensive, and the grenade throw AoE is capable of picking up energy orbs, including the gas dot AoE clouds. Not only will be passively getting energy super easily, but you even get extra restored. Normally, this mod cannot be used on AoE weapons. Since we're just using basic AoE nukes, we're going to be taking secondary Merciless today instead of Deadhead like the earlier build. This does also speed up the reload animation, so you want to be a bit careful and cancel the reload as soon as possible with the melee swing once the grenade throw is set up. That's it. The Panzer build this time is a normal one with Martyr and Fetch up, since we aren't relying on self damage to buff Champion's Blessing anymore. Showcase time? This is the one I was excited to show you. The throw DPS has ridiculous scaling. Basically, once you have Hema set up for Champion's Blessing, you just go around ensnaring stuff. Be on 0 ammo in magazine and press reload to yeet them. Try to aim the grenade at the main enemy's head, but that isn't too important. Most of the time, you won't even see crits because the damage is so high you only see the white dot clouds for some reason. But it's basically all oranges and some reds. The build reaches 246.5% crit chance with Avenger active, meaning it's still above 200% without it. As soon as the grenade is thrown, swing your melee to cancel the reload and then press aim or mouse 1 to pull Catabolyst back out again. You should have 1 ammo restored and will instantly fire out the beam to drain it back to 0. Find another group of enemies, cast Ensnare, and throw the grenade again. Make sure also to recast Bless now and then again. You probably saw a few of the oranges and reds in there. Basically, these enemies are dying on hit. It's just too much damage. Several 100,000 up to nearly a million. And remember, there are gas and electric dots chaining off of this. They aren't living long enough to see any of that, though I do admit it is a tiny bit clunky. As you can see, there are 2 unique and very interesting ways to make use of Champion's Blessing work on Trinity beyond just praying your teammates stay at affinity range and taking damage, or say Elemental Ward shenanigans to force your pet to have non-max HP. Is this a meta augment? I wouldn't say so, but it's very fun and opens up entirely new strategies I didn't expect. Yes, there is a combat discipline in play, but honestly I've literally never used it this way before. Like, using a Bleeding Dragon key to reduce HP max? That's new to me. This setup falls into partial theory crap, but there are definitely even more weapons to mess around with that can take advantage of this as well. Feel free to try it out. I've also hope I've been able to shine a light on how strong Catabolyst can really be, as well as hopefully showcasing a satisfactory Cernos Prime build as requested. If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get new information out always as soon as possible. Like I'm done with covering the Sisters of Parvos and Plaguestar updates. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis. I'm also preparing to get you the info first once more new war info drops. You don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching and see you all next time.